welcome back to the latest episode of Candid Conversations with a Housewife, and I, Miss Jenny. And so we're jumping right into it because we have a lot of really good information to get into today. We are going to be talking about to baby or not to baby. That is the question. And so, right now in our culture, it seems to be it seems to be a growing fascination to not want to have kids. But I'm going to shed some light on that and call some fact out from the fiction as to whether or not that's really true, whether or not people are wanting to have less kids, and if women are, running from motherhood like it's claimed that they are on TikTok. And we're going to talk about some stats. We're going to get into some numbers about, what people say, how much it costs to have a baby and to raise a child, the pros and the cons. Because even someone like me, I'm gonna lay my cards out right now that I am absolutely 100% in favor of couples, married couples to be exact, having children and having lots of children. But there are some things that can be seen as downsides to it, and we're going to address that. And David, you can go ahead and drop the link right now. For people to want to come up, because we can just do both. We can have people talking, or we can have people want to come up, and I'm gonna go over my things I want to mention. So getting right into it. One of the main things that people talk about when they're like, I don't want to have a kid. I can't have a kid right now. It's too expensive. And David, you can bring up the first article I want to go over, but I'm going to go over and talk about some notes I have. And so people, they like to give this excuse as, oh, well, we can't have a child right now because the economy is bad. Or, I don't make enough money, or I don't have enough time, or things like that. But, if you want to, where there's a will, there's a way. And so all the articles I'm going to be showing tonight, I got are from this year. I wanted to get the most up-to-date information that I could find. And so this is from January of this year. And the headline says that young Americans still want the same number of kids, just not right now. And so I'm going to go over, I'm going to read this article. Thank goodness my eyes are good because the print is so small. But it says, when birth rates fail in the United States, experts try to figure out what's happening. The fertility rate is at the lowest since the 1970s, 1.7 per woman, according to a new study. But it's not that young people today don't want children, new research suggests. In fact, they want the same amount as their parents had. And so, I think that we can kind of get deluded by social media into thinking that, oh, people don't want to have kids anymore. Like, people are so anti-child. But a lot of that is really just a psyop. And people, they're being convinced of, this lie that says that having a kid is too expensive, or that it's too much work, or what have you. But a lot of people are not falling for it, less than you might think. Going on, it reads, instead, young Americans may simply be having more difficulty achieving the life goals in order to have kids, said study co-founder Sarah Hayford, director of the Ohio State University Institute for Population Research. You see a lot of things like, oh, young people just aren't interested in having children, or young people have better things to do, like I was saying. And we don't find that, Hayford says. We find that young people are interested in having children, and people want children. They're planning to have children. It's just other things that are making it hard to carry out those plans. Thank you, David. The U.S. fertility rate peaked during the post-World War II baby boom at 3.58 in 1958 and reached a low of 1.77 in 1972. Now, this is interesting because when I first saw this, I didn't realize that, because 3.58 still sounds kind of low for, a baby boom. Because I've actually heard and seen studies that said that when, before birth control was a thing, and back when, societies didn't have access to, hormonal birth control or contraceptives of any kind, that couples will have on average 9 children. So that's what I thought when I went into this article. I thought couples were having, armfuls of children, but I guess the peak has only ever been a little less than 4%, or 4 kids. So going forward, it says, after a rebound, birth rates plummeted during the Great Recession, starting in 2008, and continued to drop even after, Hayford said. For the study, Hayford and co-author Karen Benjamin Guzzo, director of the Carolina Population Center at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, used data from the U.S. National Survey of Family Growth. They looked at 13 groups of women and 10 groups of men who born between the 1960s and the 2000s. Participants were asked whether they planned to have kids and how many they expected to have. On average, women born between 1995 and 1999, and I would be in that group, I was born in 1998, who responded to that question when they were 20 to 24 years old said they wanted 2.1 children. That was close to what women born in 1965 to 1969 wanted at the same age, which is 2.2. The percentage who said they didn't plan to have kids rose from 5% to 8% in the 1960s and 1970s to about 8% to 16% in the 1990s and 2000s. But researchers said that change alone didn't explain the declining birth rates. One factor is a reduction in unintended births, research said. Now, I can definitely see this from personal experience because I have family members who have, children unexpectedly. And I know a guy who he has a child, and he had that child not in high school, but I think it was like right out of high school that he got his girlfriend pregnant. And that's his only child. And he had a vasectomy. And he said, I'm not having any more kids. And, it's unfortunate that, that child is going to have to be an only child, fully biologically speaking. But because, if he had waited and had a child in marriage, like the way God told us to, then he probably wouldn't have gotten burned from that scenario and not, been so turned off to the idea of having more kids. He probably would have wanted more, and that child could, have been a big sister. So yeah, that definitely makes sense that, people don't want to have kids if, they get burned from the experience of, I had this one kid when I wasn't ready. It was overwhelming. And, I don't want to do that again. Who could blame them? And it says the study also found evidence that as people age, they change their minds, reducing the number of kids they want. Finances and taking longer to find a romantic partner can explain some of the delays, Hayford said. And that also makes sense too, because the number of kids that you probably see yourself having at 21 is, most likely going to be a little bit higher than what you see at 31. Because when you're 21, you have a lot more energy and you feel like, oh yeah, I could take on, 4 kids. But when you're 31, you're probably like, 2 if you're lucky. And says, going on, that it's hard to buy a house or to find a stable place to rent, she said. Housing feels like it takes longer to line up. The delay may mean that people who have trouble conceiving will have less time to manage the problem. That can make it harder to fulfill the goal of having 2 or 3 children, Hafer said. Jennifer Barber, a professor of sociology and senior scientist at the Kinsey Institute at Indiana University, reviewed the findings. I agree with their conclusion that people are just preferring later childbearing, Barber said. And when you delay it, you're taking the risk that maybe you're not going to get to do it. This is another aspect that I've seen play out in my own life, where I've seen women who didn't want to have kids right away and put off childbearing. And then when they got a little bit older and they were, ready to have kids, they found out that they were infertile, and they found out that something was wrong, whether it be with them or their husband. And now they're scrambling, in their later times, trying to get pregnant when, if they had started earlier, then maybe they probably would have had the same problem, but they would have had more time to combat it, or they may not have even encountered that problem to begin with. And so, yeah, it's all fun and games until, you're in the infertility clinic. So 2 or 3, these 2. Okay. This delay in childbearing may dovetail with another trend: young people having an extended transition to adulthood because it takes long to establish a household or a career. As a result, people may move back in with their parents for a while, Barbara said. I do think what you're seeing in this is this delayed is this delayed preference for delayed childbearing does really reflect young people's desire to wait to form families and wait to have children, Barbara said. It reflects their uncertainty about whether they have the stuff it takes to form a family. Babies are expensive for middle class people, Barbara noted. And we're going to talk about that because, like I said, that's one of the biggest things that you'll hear about people hiding behind this excuse of, oh, having babies is too expensive. So keep that in mind. As long as people are struggling to make ends meet, you're going to keep seeing these same things, she said. The study also notes that barriers exist in the United States around economics, childcare, and health insurance. Forming your family is one of the most important things that contributes to our well-being over the long run, Barbara said. Being able to achieve the family that you want is a huge has huge implications just for individual humans. Thank you. I was struggling. And for individual humans about their happiness and their well-being and their health. This all matters in a bigger societal way too. If there are not enough young people to work and pay Social Security, there won't be enough money for retirees to draw from it. For example, in terms of consumer markets, there may not be enough people to buy goods. Some of those problems can be managed by changing the retirement age or increasing immigration rates, Hayford said. Research for the new study was done prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, and looking at the impact on fertility will happen in the coming months and years. And another thing with COVID-19 impacting fertility and infertility is the fact that, the jab played a major role in upsetting a lot of women's hormonal balances and their cycles. And so a lot of women reported that after they got, the injection, that their periods were off, and that, their cycles were different, and they weren't ovulating, or, all types of stuff that, plays a part in your hormones being off whack. And so, of course, that is going to have effects in your fertility. That's going to have effect in the amount of children that people are having, Now, if you ask me, that's a feature, not a bug, but that's for another time. And it says, most Americans do have children eventually, Hayford said, including about 80% of women who will at least have one. Having children is a really important life decision for a lot of people, she said. Having a child is a really important decision. It should be for everybody. At least making the decision on whether or not you're going to have kids should be a big decision. That's not something you should just kind of go into all willy-nilly, I would hope. It's important for people's values and the kind of people that they want to be, the kind of lives they want to lead, and it also has really important economic consequences for the way people approach work. The findings were recently published in the journal Population and Development Review. And so I guess it just, gives some citations and whatnot. And so, yes, David, you can pull up the next article. And so, yeah, that was just kind of like by way of introduction. And so, we're just that was like, an overview of reasons why people give that, they're anxious, and, whether it be for financial reasons or for childcare reasons, health insurance, things like that. I'm going to talk about, culture and partner issues. Those are also really big issues that, people see as inhibitors as to why they're not going to have kids. But like I said, those are all just excuses. So we can get started on this article. And while you're pulling that up, my notes on culture is that, a lot of people, and usually this is coming from people who are more so on the right or like libertarian, not usually people who are on the left, because they're the ones who control the culture right now. But for people who are more center or right-leaning, they feel like the culture's out of control, the culture's off the rails. I don't want to bring people into this world who are going to have to deal with this and who are going to have to, be brainwashed. And how am I going to raise decent people in a society that, is, wants to infect them with, drag queens and Marxists and communism and socialism and, and atheism? How am I going to raise people in that? How am I going to rightfully bring, young children into this world? That's so crazy. I understand that, it's a valid concern. But here we're going to talk about when it comes to actually having a baby in a hospital. And it says having a baby is one of the most momentous experiences of your life, but it can also be one of the most expensive. Spending money on essentials like baby furniture. Now I should have marked this so I could have paid attention to it, but it says essentials, and in the list of baby furniture. Yeah, because women 100 years ago were spending money on baby furniture. I remember my mom. She told me that my oldest brother, that she put him in the top dresser drawer of their dresser. Like he would that's where he slept. That was like his bassinet. When he was first born, is in the top of the dresser. Baby furniture. Give me a break. Baby furniture or stroller and diapers can add up quickly, more quickly than you expect. You might also be surprised to see your hospital bill after delivery. And so these are some numbers that they pulled up, I guess, to be generalizations. And so for Aetna, offers plans on 50 states. Um, and so yeah, these are examples. And again, going down to average cost of childbirth in the U.S., it says giving birth costs about $18,865 on average. And I have a friend who just had a baby about 5 months ago, and I don't know exactly how much she paid. I'm not that heavily pocket watching, but I'm sure I could ask her. I just never asked her. But yeah, I mean, she has told me that she has been paying out the wazoo, and she had to pay for her birth and delivery when she was still pregnant. And so she has to pay a lot, and you know and it is expensive to have a baby in a hospital, but that can be mitigated. But going on, including pregnancy, delivery, and postpartum care. According to the Peterson Kaiser Family Foundation health system tracker, health insurance can cover most of that cost. But what if you don't have health insurance? You can expect a hefty hospital bill. The true cost of giving birth depends on many factors, like the type of birth you have and your location. You can save thousands on childbirth if you have health insurance. Here's the average cost of delivery and how much health insurance members usually pay out of pocket for costs. And so here it says that the average cost of childbirth is, the 18,000 number that we went over, and the average out-of-pocket cost for health insurance plans members. So if you have a child in a hospital, you're pretty much on average, if you have health insurance, going to pay a little less than $3,000. Now, depending on how deep your pockets are, that might sound fine. That might be something you could swing in a few months, pay that off at your credit card, what have you. And getting more specific, to have a vaginal delivery would be about 14,000, and then you'd be paying out of pocket a little less, 2,600. And if you have a cesarean, boy, the pain of a cesarean is nothing compared to the pain that your pockets are going to feel with that 26K being snatched out, and you're going to be paying about $3,200. Would that be cash or card? And so it goes on to say, what factors into the cost of giving birth? The cost of having a baby can be unpredictable, and you probably won't know the final amount until your baby is at least a few months old and you've received all the bills. Here's a look at all the many variables that contribute to the price. Location. The cost of giving birth varies based on where you live. The difference happens even if you have health insurance. For women with health insurance, the Healthcare Cost Institute estimates that the average cost of out-of-pocket for birth are highest in Nebraska and lowest in Michigan. Now, when I first saw that, I was very surprised because, of course, I'm thinking, as a right-leaning person, I think that pretty much all bad things happen in New York and California. So I was very surprised when I first read this to see that the highest cost is in Nebraska. What's going on in Nebraska? Like, does Nebraska have the best hospitals or something? Like, are there OBGYNs and their neonatal techs, are they eating good over there, costing the most? I thought that was crazy. And so you can keep scrolling down because I live in Virginia. So I want to highlight how much it is in Virginia. Yeah, so crazy how, they just charge an arm and a leg. And so, yeah, so here it's, 1800. And now, of course, I forgot what the categories are. But um, so, yeah, and you can keep scrolling down so I can finish reading the bottom of it. Yeah, New York. Yeah, and I was so surprised to see that. And like Oklahoma, 2,700. Like what? I was really surprised, especially since Virginia is a Commonwealth, because usually things here are a lot more expensive. But fact reality is stranger than fiction. That much is certain. All right, going down to prenatal care. You can expect to visit your obstetrician's office between 10 to 15 times for a normal pregnancy with no complications. Now, this is something I really want to pause and talk about because 10 to 15 times for a pregnancy with no complications? What? Why would you go to the doctor that many times if you have no problems? You know, I don't have any children, but I mean, I know lots of childbearing women, and I'm 25 years old. So I know a lot of women who are having kids, as we speak, and I know a lot of women who are older. And I've never met a woman, to my knowledge, who said that they've, gone to the doctor 10 to 15 times for a child that is not sick or for a pregnancy that is not having issues. Okay. Okay, so I had my screen I had my screen on full screen, so I couldn't see any of the comments, and I just took it down because I was like, I feel like I should read some of the comments. Okay, so um, I'm gonna address some of the comments for a second. So thank you here for the tea. Hello, glad you could make it. Hey Mo, nice to see you. Okay, here for the T says, I had my first at 26 and my second at 33. I felt totally different. It was a breeze in my 20s. Yeah, yeah. And so just imagine if you had your first one in your 30s, you feel like, yeah, this is something I'm not interested in doing again. Because I don't know if you plan on having any more kids, but I'm sure that when you had your second kid, that probably knocked the wind out of you. It was a variety of discussions here. I love it. Yeah, thank you, Mo. And EAE, love to see you. Thank you, sir. In my opinion, the best time to have a child is when you're a Black teenager. Oh my goodness. Anyways, back to what I was reading. Yeah, it's easier for me to read it if I make it my full screen. So yeah, you can expect to visit 10 to 15 times, and I thought that was ridiculous. Now of course I am not a doctor. I am not giving medical advice. But that being said, I mean, I just feel like some things are kind of just common sense. I feel like that number is highly inflated because when you're having your first baby, you feel anxious and worried, and so you're gonna want to go to the doctor more because you're like, oh, what's happening? What's going on? And you just kind of feel like you want to know what's happening, and you're more scared, so you're going to the doctor all the time. But I'm sure that women who are on their fifth or their sixth kid are going to the doctor like twice, their whole pregnancy, and barely even seeing the doctor afterwards, if at all. So I feel like that's why that number is so high, but I could be wrong. And it goes on to say, you will need various tests, including routine blood work, a glucose test, genetic testing, ultrasounds, and other screenings, which affect the cost of having a baby. The type of birth. One of the biggest factors that impacts the cost of giving birth is the type of delivery. Vaginal births generally cost less than cesarean births, with and without health insurance. Now, my mother-in-law, she works in the medical field, and she was giving me the tea on this, and she was saying that, it's a lot more common now to have, these emergency C-sections, and oh my gosh, everything was going fine, but now we have to rush you in for a C-section, and now it's going to cost you an extra, $10,000. And so what she was saying is that, a lot of the times that these hospitals, they might see that something is maybe going wrong, and they'll kind of wait to address it until it becomes an emergency situation, or that that they're just wanting to get you in for a cesarean. That is kind of, they're being motivated to do that. That's kind of the push that's coming from the higher ups, because the hospitals make more money when you are being more treated. If you just push the baby out in two pushes, and you might spend one night, and then you're like, okay, I'm out of here, sending the bill in the mail, then they're not going to get as much money from you as they would have if you were strapped down and had the anesthesia, and you had a room full of doctors, and then they're cutting you open, and you got to stay for a week and all that stuff. It's all, friend. what's that saying? Follow the money, and the love of money is the root of all evil. And so when it comes to these women, because a lot of women today are having these emergency C-sections, and it's like this was not a thing like 30 years ago. Like you didn't hear about as many women just being rushed into the emergency room because something's going wrong while they're having deliveries. And so, hey, you didn't hear that from me, but follow the money. That's all I can say. Mother's hospital charges. If you deliver a baby in the hospital, the cost of the hospital stay can vary significantly. For a vaginal delivery, the average hospital stay is 48 hours. For a cesarean birth, the average stay is 96 hours. Yes, and time is money. those hours are not free. They are charging you for staying in their bed, okay? Your hospital charges could be much more expensive if there are complications during the delivery or if you need specialty care or monitoring after birth. Medications. A medicated birth can be an epidural. A medicated birth with an epidural will increase the cost of delivery. The cost of having a baby is also slightly higher if you're induced rather than having a spontaneous birth. Of course, because they have to give you certain things to induce the labor. So those I don't know what it is, those chemicals or those hormones that they're injecting into you, those cost money. Babies' hospital charges. All babies need some basic medical care after delivery. Hospitals will monitor your baby's breathing and heart rate, administer their first vaccines, red flag, and take blood sample and before you and the baby can be discharged. For babies with difficult births or babies born with certain conditions, there can be additional monitoring and tests that will add to the total hospital charge. Oh, great. We have a visitor. Simon, you're on mute.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Hello, how are you?
You okay? Just a point you brought up. So is it just your reading, or do you think that C sections are related to financial gain?
Yeah, C-sections are absolutely related to financial gain for the hospitals.
Okay, so there's no sort of like physical connection to C sections. Are you saying that women choose to have C sections as such?
Well, no, not that the women are choosing to have the C-section, but that the doctors are prescribing the C-sections, to say that it's an emergency and that you need to be rushed in here because most women don't want to have C-sections, and most C-sections that do happen in hospitals are not planned; they're emergencies.
Do you know anyone who's had a C section? Just out of interest.
Yeah, I do.
So what did you speak to them about the experience of how that went and if it was planned or not?
Yeah, the first person that comes to mind is my mother-in-law, who her last child that she had, who is about 4 years old now. She said that the experience of what happened was that she was in the hospital. She felt the baby was coming, and she said that she felt more pain than normal because she had already had four children before, so she kind of this was not her first rodeo. And so she was like, yeah, this doesn't feel right. Something feels wrong. I'm in more pain than usual. And they were just being very dismissive. And then at the very end, they were like, oh, the his heart rate's dropping. We got to give you an emergency C-section. And so she felt like that could have been completely avoided had they just listened to her and heeded her warnings.
It's kind of interesting. So, like you said, like she had like four children before,
Yeah.
and it was okay. So, do you think this is a new age thing, like in terms of in relation to the funding XYZ that's related to um you know women giving birth? Because I'd find that kind of odd if you was able to have four children without a C-section, and then suddenly you're having a C-section. That wasn't my experience, and it's partially why it came up because I've had like real experience in terms of my ex-wife having a C-section, so it didn't really go down straight away like that. But it's just interested in your thought process.
What was her experience? Because she probably, she might have had a really good experience with it.
No, it was really bad.
Oh, okay.
I mean, she didn't want to have a C-section, but it that was the only outcome.
Hmm. So
She
hers
wasn't.
was an emergency.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you know about things that take. Well, you must know. I mean, but the thing is things take place, in people's capability, which you may not see the signs early on. We have all these parental classes, prenatal classes, and all the rest of it. So but they're not about to turn around and tell you something. You go to the screenings, you go to the, all that sort of stuff. But then, even then, up until the point that you actually give birth, that's when it could be flagged up. But the interesting point that I sort of was lots tapping into what you was talking about was the connection between the financial gain.
Hmm.
Because what if that's taken away? Do you think
Like,
there's a need for C sections or not, or do you think it's just purely financial gain?
well, I wouldn't say it's purely financial, but I would say that it is heavily promoted due to the financial gain. Like when it comes to just your average sick people going to hospitals, like people coming down with diseases and things like that. Like hospitals profit off of habitually sick people, off of chronic illnesses, and so do I think that hospitals? Well, I mean, I have a very low opinion of the medical industry, but I would say that,
Why
they're not,
why is that then?
um, because, well, being that I'm a Christian, I believe that the love of money is the root of all evil. And I see a lot of corruption and evil going on in the medical industry. And it makes sense because there's a lot of money to be made off of the backs of sick people. Because if someone is healthy, then they're no longer a customer. And so they have a vested interest in your downfall. And so it just makes sense that they're going to do things like, why are there Starbuckses and McDonald's and vending machines in hospitals? They should only be giving you like lean ground meat and like fruit smoothies and salads. If you're in a hospital, surely they would want it to be the highest quality and caliber of food that you can consume, because any doctor worth their salt would tell you that your nutrition and your diet plays an inconsequential, an insurmountable part in your overall health. So when I see stuff like that, I'm just like, okay, well, there's a fox in the hen house. There's obviously something going on where you want people to be sick, and you're promoting this, and you're contributing to it to an extent.
That's interesting. Uh, it's interesting because that we live in capitalism, right? So
Oh yeah.
if you're going to run any type of industry, there's means and gains to be had. So if we're going to have institutions that are out there that ultimately are out here to facilitate us as human beings, let's say someone's bearing a child, then that needs to be weighed up, right? Like we can't all be in a position where, and I get where you're coming from in terms of
Hmm.
sources, right? In terms of what's good for us. But
Yeah.
that's not necessarily how it works in terms of being able to facilitate everybody, because everyone has their own viewpoint. I mean, so therefore we're given the choice. So if you want to have a house birth, for example, if you want to give birth to your child at home, you have that choice, right?
Yes.
Okay, so then why um say that the institutions that are out here that may have these corporate unethical companies within their institution are doing a bad thing?
Um, are doing a bad, well, because it's very unlikely, and it's very seldom that you see any corporate or leading medical studies or people encouraging you to have a home birth. People think that it's dangerous. People think that it's kind of old-fashioned and barbaric to have a child at home. People think that's just something that happens on accident, if you don't make it to the hospital in time or something. But there's a lot of benefits to home births, and oftentimes it can actually be a lot safer.
I agree with you, but ultimately, it's a choice, right? We do have that choice. We have freedom of choice in that sort of sense, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So um, I'm just saying, um, the thing is you could either sort of lay your trust in the institutions that are not perfect, and go, okay, let's see how it goes, because that's most of us. Like when my daughter was born, it was one of the most horrific things I've seen in my life. But at the same time, I don't know if I was qualified to deal with that personally, um, in my own sort of way, because I was qualified in different things.
Hmm.
So there's always a balance with these things. So I think the topic that you brought up was kind of really interesting. Um, but it is always there's always like, well, where are we at, and what provisions have been laid before us, because um I think um ultimately we have a choice. I don't know if I went left with the conversation or anything, because your topic is to baby or not to baby. I don't know if I missed anything, but I sort of came in when you were reading the review.
No, yeah, you're good. Because maybe someone else is thinking that too. So yeah, I guess what I would say is that they want to push you in a certain direction. So yes, you have choices and you are free to make decisions. But like with the situation with the emergency C-sections, um, now I don't know if you can. I don't know if you're even allowed to decline an emergency C-section. Like if your doctor tells you, "Hey, the baby's heart rate is dropping. Hey, the baby's blood pressure is dropping. We have to rush you in for surgery." I don't even know if you're allowed to decline that. And
You
whether
have to
they'll.
sign a waiver.
Oh, you have to sign a waiver for that.
Yeah,
So if you
because
don't.
yeah, you have to. Otherwise, they don't perform the operation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
So with my situation is that because it's literally a life or death situation. Um, because I don't want to get too gory with it, but I'm just saying it's a life and death situation. So you have to sign a waiver, and they
okay.
they they give that to you last minute, like literally just before uh you know the lady gets carted into the room where they have to perform it.
Right. See, because they're trying to lean you into a certain direction. But hold that thought. I'm gonna respond to this comment that says the hospital is more so to check and verify that the baby is healthy / run blood tests, etc. That's how we found out that my nephew has sickle cell. How would one find out immediately via home birth? So this is a good question. Thank you, EAE. Um, and so children that are born in home births, they're more, if it's intentional, if it's not just an accident, if a child is intentionally born at home, then more often than not, the mother is going to have a midwife or a doula there. And the midwife and the doula, they are trained medical professionals. I know the midwife is. I don't know if a doula is a medical professional, but a midwife is a medical professional. And so she can run tests and she can make sure the baby's fine. So it's not just, I mean, but there are some people who have unassisted home births. That's a whole nother category. But especially if it's your first child and you want to have a home birth, I would definitely say to do it with a midwife there. And she can see and, run tests on the baby. And if something is significantly wrong with the child, then you can go to the hospital. But the thing about hospitals that you want to keep in mind is that, what are hospitals for? Hospitals are for sick or injured people. And pregnancy is not a sickness or an injury. And so going to the hospital should not be the default setting when it comes to birth, because I feel like when you put it in that framing, hi Paul, when you put it in that framing, you're putting it in your mind that there's something wrong with being pregnant. And I've heard people even come out and say this, like, a baby is a parasite or whatever. And so taking it out of that light and putting it back in a home, your home is cozy, and your home is warm, and your home has you in it and your husband, and it's very intimate, and you're not in some sterile cold room laying on your back with your feet up, and got who knows in there all up inside of you. And so yeah,
That's
having a home birth.
that's a good point. I mean, the thing is it depends what you're used to, I guess. Um,
Hmm.
and especially like what you said about being in a hospital after you've given birth, that after part could be more traumatizing, um, because if you're in a ward and you're hearing all these other babies, some babies may not have come out the same way your child came out,
Hmm.
and you hear all the doctors talking to the other patients about what else happened over there, and you start to get anxieties about what may happen to you.
Yeah.
So that all plays a part in that I'd say 48 hours. I mean, they used to keep women in for like 7 days. Now
Yeah.
they're like keeping women in for a day or two and saying go home. So you know um it depends on your situation, but I do know that some people are more comfortable doing things at home, depend if they've got the setting to do that. And to address EAE, um, you can have you know uh, the same professionals come into your house because they're aware of it, and it's part of their service. Not all practitioners operate within the hospital nowadays, anyway. Um,
Hmm.
you get nurses and you know people coming and supporting the person that's giving birth in the house as well, and running them tests same way. The tests these days are more they're not like extravagant like they were in the olden days. Do you get what I mean? It's more like a prick on the finger and something, and it give you a result real quick.
Hmm. Yeah, so that kind of goes to address Joshua Jones's question about how do you do tests? How do tests get done without a lab? And so now I've never witnessed a home birth, so I'm well not in person. I've seen them online, but so I'm just going off of what I've seen. But what I have seen is that I guess you know, they do stuff beforehand. So if there's like any type of, thing like sickle cell, like EAE brought up, they could run a test on a baby for sickle cell before the child is born. You can draw blood from a child still in utero. And so they could do that. That could happen before the birth. And then, they could see that beforehand and then do things beforehand. But then, when the child is born, the nurse, the midwife, she can bring a scale. She can bring the clamp for your finger to test your blood oxygen levels, a blood pressure thing, stethoscope, all that stuff, to test all the major things going on with the child, um, for immediate purposes. So, like, if the child is breathing, the child is crying, the child can move, open their eyes, all that stuff, if the child can do all of that, then they'll be okay. And then if something else is wrong, on the inside, then that can be addressed at the checkup, or that's something that probably would have been addressed beforehand during the prenatal visits. That's what I'm assuming. So,
Yeah, you're right. I mean, as I said, I missed your original question. So when you said to baby or not to baby, what was that about? Sorry, I don't
oh,
want to.
so that's just like a play on words from the Shakespearean question to be or not to be. And so by the first article that I pulled up was just kind of by way of introduction. It was saying how people still want to have kids, but they just want to have them later, and they're addressing the different reasons as to why that is. Primarily being financial, people worried about their living situation, um, their their partner status, things like that.
Oh,
Joshua
okay.
says. Take fluids, send off to lab. How does one select a midwife that has access to lab privileges? Oh, I mean, you can just look up midwives in your area, and because, like I said, a midwife is a legal medical provider, and so in their office, in their clinics, they have access to all the different stuff. Well, I mean, depending on the type of midwife that you have. Some of them are very kind of hippy dippy, and they do a lot of they like to do it the more traditional way. And so if you're into that, then there's that. But some of them have pretty much all the same things that a regular doctor has, but it just feels more intimate. It's more one-on-one. So there are different types that you can get. And if you're pregnant, then you're probably going to come across a lot of pregnant women, because that's just kind of how things work. You come across people that are in your stage of life, and you can ask them. But yeah, at the end of the day, you can just look it up. And of course, a midwife is a very popular thing, and they're becoming more popular again. They kind of fell off in favor, but they're kind of resurging. And so, yeah, a lot of midwives, they have a lot of the same OBGYN technology that you can get in a clinic. And so that was the first article that I was talking about, was just kind of way of introduction. And this one is about the cost of actually bringing a child into the world of, giving birth in a hospital. And so Joshua Jones says again, I hate Jenny's take on children, but she gives accurate advice. I ought to have more children. Joshua, it's okay. You're going to be fine. People think that, oh, I can't afford this. Oh, I don't want to do this. But at the end, I'm going to address the kind of the flip side of my arguments. And so you guys stay tuned for that. So it's going to be worth it in the end. But where did I leave off? I think I left off at baby's hospital charges. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, all babies need some basic medical care after delivery. Doctors will monitor your baby's breathing and heart rate, administer their first vaccines. Oh yeah, and take a blood sample before you and your baby can get discharged. For babies with difficult births or babies born with certain conditions, there can be additional monitoring and tests that will add to the total hospital charge. Newborn care. After your baby is born, they will need to visit a pediatrician to receive newborn care. Your baby will receive complete physical exam and additional vaccines as part of another red flag, as part of the exam. You might also need to meet a lactation consultant within the first few weeks after delivery, which usually is covered by insurance. And then so here, nearing the end, it says, how much should you expect to pay if you have insurance? The average out-of-pocket cost for childbirth with health insurance is $2,854, but the costs for vaginal birth are lower than those for cesarean, and we already went over that. For labor and delivery, out-of-pocket costs can include a health insurance deductible, co-payments, and co-insurance. Depending on the specifics of your plan, your out-of-pocket costs will be lower if you've already reached your annual deductible. And so we've already kind of touched on it, but I just kind of want to give my game plan for when I have a child and what I would prescribe to you guys as, the almighty housewife. And so I would say that, when you get pregnant, that you should, I would recommend seeing a midwife rather than OBGYN. I feel like they have just a more personalized feel. I feel like they care about you more as an individual because their client load is usually a lot smaller. They're not, just seeing, back to back to back. Even if they're a high end demand, it just feels like they really are taking care of you as an individual more. And when it comes to birth, like, I pretty much have everything that I want to do like already planned out because I'm just like a very forward thinking person. And so what I would recommend is to have your baby at home, have your baby in the bathtub if you have a big enough tub, or you can buy an actual birthing pool that's like basically an inflatable pool. And so you could buy just like a kiddie pool, or you could buy an actual birthing tub that has like the handlebars on it and like a cup holder. And they make those specifically. Or I've heard of the Bradley method, That seems to be a fan favorite among a lot of women who have births at home. It's a specific technique where you put your body in certain positions to relieve the pain that you're feeling in your lower back and in your pelvis that will open you up, ease your pain, and so you have a much more painless delivery. Not totally painless from what I've heard, but a much more painless delivery. You have your midwife come and your doula come and they administer to you. And I should have pulled up numbers on this. For some reason, I didn't think to pull up numbers on this, but and that'll be exponentially less expensive, for them to just come into your house. And depending on how healthy you are, and depending on how many checkups you had prior, I've seen women, just kind of do it like they did back in the way back days, and just have them and their husband, and they do an unassisted, unmedicated home birth. Because like another thing that they were mentioning in this article is that it's not just the physical act of having the baby, but it's the epidural. It's the time that you spend there. It's all the different accoutrements that they give you while you're staying in the hospital, which are not necessary. You can have your baby unmedicated. I know it sounds scary, but it's possible. And then of course that'll save you money. Oh, okay. EAE says, then there's the ethical question as to is it even okay to actually bring a sentient being into existence without its signed consent? Something the average parent has never once spent 5 seconds pondering. Well, like I said, I'm not a parent, but I did think about that because I saw that video that you shared on Discord, and I didn't watch the video, but I saw the thumbnail for it, and so I thought about that, and I was like, well, that is something I hadn't thought about before. Is it ethical to bring children into the world? And to that, I would say yes, it is ethical because living is better than not living, and
That's actually a moot point. I just want to point that out. It's like, uh, we can't predetermine something that's not determined. Like, you know, I understand his sentiment in itself, but the it's like the chicken and egg conversation. Like, you can't go, well, is it ethical for um a being where they do not understand what ethical is. So the person that understands what ethical is has to lead. That's how we're led in life. We all have parents. So if it's like saying, I don't know what I took back from that statement. Was do we need the parents to tell us what life looks like? Um, we need experience, and we need to understand things before we endeavor. There's no one step before the two step, and
mhm.
there's rationale behind all of that, like if you really look into it. So it's actually an unethical question or statement.
Yeah. Yeah, I see what you're saying. It's kind of like what I've heard when people say like, you should ask your baby consent before you change their diaper, and it's like, what? It's just like, what do
There's
you?
no way you can do that because
Yeah.
they don't even know what a diaper is. I mean, you know, if anyone's been a parent, they would understand that diapers is a big game. And even before diapers existed, we used to do things a bit differently. So we'd use towels, right?
Mhm.
So I know diapers can be unethical to some people, and that's why they may bring up that question. But we live in a world where we're living in capitalism and consumerism, and everything's fast paced, and we've got to do things in a certain type of way, and that's been put on us. It's not about us. Some people can choose to go and live in the forest. They can do that if they want, and they may still use towels. But we have to understand, in generality, that people are different. And I mean, the most interesting part is we have choices and what we choose to do. So if someone's had an experience in their life where their parents raised them in a certain way, that's an environmental thing. It's not really a general thing. Like no one's been raised the same way. So, what we choose to do with our children and how our children are raised or how our parents raised us, we need to put that into perspective if you're capable of putting that into perspective, because not many people are. Many people don't have the time and space to even think about it. They just, go from one thing to another, and it's like Lego. And it's like click, click, click until they get to a point, which is usually in their elder ages where they're 60 and they can reflect on it. Maybe when they've retired or something like that. If
Hmm.
they've had a job or something like that. But there are people out here where they are not in that situation where they can and have the opportunity to actually reflect on what they've done and put things into perspective.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Um, EAE uh, also says, I disagree with Jen, saying being alive is better than not existence. You could argue that being alive is better than being dead, but if you don't exist, you're not missing out on anything in the first place. Well, yeah, I mean, you don't know what you're missing out on. But, the thing about life is that it's not just a privilege, but it's a right. People have the right, to live. And so, but then again, that also goes. So, one of my next points that I want to mention about, reasons why people are so apprehensive about having kids is partner issues. And a lot of people don't want to be single parents. They don't want to be, taken advantage of in their marriage, and they don't want to feel like a married single parent. And they don't want to have to deal with all that because they feel like, okay, well, having a child is a really big responsibility, and I want to be able to do it to the best of my ability. And so, when it comes to that, people feel like, oh, well, I shouldn't, have a kid and all that stuff. But in reality, if you are married and if you are a serious couple, then then your child is going to be benefited.
Is that your
And
husband laughing in the background?
yes, it is.
Yeah,
He's
damn
totally
right. He's right on.
just trying to distract me. And so yes, um, um, to be married, to be brought into the world, is a privilege, but it's also a right. And so that's why you have to have, wise and mature parents, and that's why you shouldn't just be popping out these bastard children all over the place because they didn't ask to be here, like you're saying, EAE. And so that's why you have to be a responsible adult. You should be married before you're bringing in children because, they didn't consent to be here. They didn't ask to be here. And so if you're going to be responsible, if you're going to bring children into the world the right way, then you need to bring them into a situation that, is not junky, that you're not going to treat them like they're a burden, that they are an inconvenience to you when you're the reason that they are here. And so, yeah, that kind of goes hand in hand with my point about, you know, parent, spousal partner issues. Um, yeah, it makes sense that you don't want to have a bad partner or you don't want to be alone when you have a baby, but people need to take it more seriously, the vetting process of their spouse or of their partner, because at the end of the day, once you conceive the child, because life begins at conception, and everybody said amen, that you got the ball started. They're here. Once they're conceived, they're here. And so you need to take seriously the people that you're shacking up with, people that you're sleeping with, because if you're going to have a baby, then you need to take it seriously. You need to provide a life for them that is not junk. And but not to say that if a person's life is junky, then they shouldn't be here and you should abort them. So there's different aspects to that discussion.
Yeah,
And so
I got to go soon, but this dude, he brings up a lot. I mean, so I mean, the part where he's saying, but if you don't exist, you're not missing out on anything in the first place. Um, I'll tell you something. My mum passed away when I was 16 years old.
hmm,
Right, so am I missing out on something?
yeah. That's a good point.
Okay. All right. So with that, salute. Salute. Have a good night. Take care of your family. Salute to Black Man Unfiltered. I'm subscribed, so hope to see you again. I don't know when you're on. Are you on weekly or is this the first time or I don't know.
Yes, I come on
You got
every Saturday night on
every Saturday.
9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
All right, I'll see if I catch you again. Salute to your family. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you for coming up. So yeah, that was good. Any of this. Yeah, Joshua Jones says, poor JD can't hold a straight face reading any of this. Proof that men are trouble. I plead the fifth when it comes to that, Joshua. Let's get back to this article. Because we still have two more articles to go over, and I have some more things I want to mention. And so, David, you can scroll down a little bit further. I think there's a little bit more I want to read. Okay, so yeah, I wanted to read, how much should you expect to pay if you don't have insurance? Without health insurance, you can expect to pay about 18. Oh yeah, based on national average from Peterson KFF data, but the exact cost of giving birth based on type of birth, among other factors. If you don't have health insurance, you can expect to pay a much higher cost for pregnancy, births, and postpartum care. Without insurance, you're responsible for all of your medical expenses during the pregnancy and after birth. And the fact that we're still talking about health insurance, I if you want to have health insurance, then that's fine. That's your business. That's your money. But I have heard some things. I haven't seen any like actual studies or watched like a documentary on it or anything. But I've been hearing some rumbles that when it comes out to like over the course of time, like over the course of a decade, most people are going to end up paying a lot more in health insurance than they would ever take out. And that health insurance is basically a scam. Now, if you're a really sickly person, then that's probably not true. Because if you're in and out of the doctor's office all the time, then, your health insurance is probably a good thing. But if you're a pretty healthy person, you're not accident prone, then I've heard that health insurance is kind of like, throwing your money down the drain. But hey, that's just what I've heard. So do with that information what you will. And so, yeah, we can go to the next article because all of that, I've kind of already been addressing that about how, these are expenses that are entirely avoidable for most women, in most pregnancies, because, if you actually do, because the thing about it, another thing I wanted to mention about these emergency C-sections is that, a lot of the times the things that go on beforehand can be avoided if, the woman is at home, because a lot of the time, before the C-section, she might be pushing too early, and that can, stress the baby out, or, being in that atmosphere can be stressful. And if the mother's blood pressure is raised, then that can increase the chances of a C-section. And so, yeah, there are a lot of different things that can happen that can make it more likely for a C-section to happen, that are kind of mitigated when you are doing a home birth. And so I want to give a Bible verse to kind of give people some support. And John 16:33 says, "These things have I spoken unto you, that in me ye might have peace. In the world ye shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world." And so this is to, of course, to the Christians who, know that to be fruitful and multiply is a command of God. And that is not something that was just to Adam and Eve, but that is a command to all people, especially God's children, that we need to be fruitful and multiply. And, in times like these, when you feel so uncertain and when you feel so anxious about what's going on, like, there's wars or rumors of wars and famine and earthquakes and things like that, that have peace, because your Father is already there at tomorrow, so you don't have to worry about tomorrow. And so going into this article, so this is about, first, so now we've talked about, the process of, bringing a child into the world through a hospital, which is a scam. So now we're going to talk about, people are talking about, raising a child to 18 is so expensive, I can't do it, it's like $1 million. We're going to get into that now, debunk that myth. And here it starts off by saying that most people would say raising children is expensive, but some might be shocked to learn just how much you actually spend to get them to age 18. Lending Tree released a study and found that the cost of raising a child jumped more than 19% from 2016 to 2021. Okay, pay attention to this. The price of raising a child jumped 19% from 2016 to 2021. How is that even possible when raising children is one of the most fundamental things that humans have been doing since the literal dawn of time? So to raise a child is something that you can do for basically nothing, because this is something that's been happening. People have been making it work for exponentially less forever. So I just think it's so sad that these people, they buy into these lies, and they see all this fear mongering, because that's what it is. It's fear mongering, because they don't want you to have children, and so they tell you all this junk and pump your head full of lies. Jump 19%. And it goes on to say, families spend nearly 20% of their income in 2021 on basic annual expenses to raise a child. The business, the business looked at rent, food, childcare, apparel, transportation, health insurance premiums, and state tax exemptions or credits to come up with their numbers. On average, parents spend nearly $250,000, $237,482 to be exact, to raise a child up to age 18. Beyond that, the costs skyrocket with the cost of college. And college is also another trap, which I'll be talking about at some time soon. I don't know if I'm going to talk about it on here or on my channel, but I'm going to rip a new one into college, because that is one of the biggest Ponzi schemes ever cooked up. The most expensive state to raise a child is Hawaii. Now that does make sense, because Hawaii is, separated, and everything in Hawaii is expensive. One of my brothers lived there for a while. So yeah, that does make sense. Connecticut came at number 7, New Jersey is at number 12, and New York is 14th on the list. If you're looking for a bargain, South Carolina was found to be the least expensive place to raise a child, with a projected cost of being $169,000, which is still too high. It still doesn't need to be that much, even in South Carolina, but we're going to get to that. Lending Tree says to balance your finances, you should save ahead of time. Get creative with childcare. There are tips in the study. Take advantage of programs in your state or local government designed to help, and don't forget your own future. And so go down. I think there's a little bit more. And I'm not 100% certain, so I could be wrong. So chat, let me know. But isn't Lending Tree like not a bank? Oh, okay. So yeah, that is all of it. I get my articles mixed up. You can pull up the next one, the last one. Yeah, isn't Lending Tree like a bank, or don't they give out loans, right? Lending Tree. So if I'm not mistaken, oh, okay, I'm missing some chats. Okay, so Joshua says, Jenny, what are the ethics of wives and dishes? Well, I was just talking to some feminists on Instagram about this like earlier today, and I'm a firm believer in that whoever does not pay the bulk of the bills needs to do the bulk of the housework. That just seems obvious, to me, that why would a man, usually the man is the one making most of the money. So why would the man go out to work all day and then come home and cook and clean? That just doesn't make any sense to me. Seems like a raw deal on top of, marriage already being a disadvantage for a lot of men in today's society. But yeah. And so another verse I wanted to bring up is Matthew chapter 28, verses 19 and 20. That says, go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I've commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even until the end of the world. Now, there's another one that just came to mind that I do not have in my notes. Let me pull that up. That is along the same lines. Is that it? No, that's not it. Okay, there's a verse that is really good. Um, let's see here. Oh yes, yeah, Luke 12:7. It says, "But even the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear not, therefore, ye are of more value than many sparrows." And so this is just more re-encouragement for you guys because you know God is in control of Christians, not of this entire world. But the Bible says that the steps of a righteous man are guided by the Lord. And so if you are doing what God says and if you are in accordance with God, then don't worry about what the news says and what is happening halfway across the world. You just need to focus on serving God and doing what he told you, and your life is going to turn out, fine. All things work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose. And so, yeah, and that's very important. I knew this girl. She was in my youth group when I was a child, and now we're both adults. And she had a daughter, and she had a lot of difficulties with her daughter. She had to end up delivering her daughter very prematurely. And praise God, her daughter is healthy and strong now, and she's doing very well. And I made a post on Facebook, like maybe a little after the daughter was born, not thinking about this girl, just making a post, just letting stuff rattle off my mind. And I said that birth control is of the devil, which it is, and that it has no business being in the home or in the body of a Christian. And the girl who had the baby, her mom messaged me, and she was like, "Hey, I know that you mean well, but birth control can have some valid reasons and have some valid uses." I was basically saying, I don't remember the conversation now. This was like a year ago. But basically, I was like, well, it's ungodly because we are not to try to take matters of life and death into our own hands. And when it comes to like hormonal birth control, like the daily pill, that is an abortifacient because you can actually conceive a child, but the way that those pills are so effective is that they actually make the lining of your uterus hard. So the child who is maybe like just a couple days old, but is still alive because it has been conceived, it has this backup mechanism, the birth control, to where the child can be conceived, but when it gets to your uterine lining, to where it wants to implant, so you can start to grow, the lining is hard, and so the child cannot implant, and therefore the child will die. And so, if you believe that life begins at conception, then you have to submit to the fact that a hormonal birth control is an abortifacient because it can kill a very it can kill a very young child in the womb. And so I was like, it's ungodly, it's murder, all this stuff. And she was saying, well, yeah, but so and so, she had a really hard time, and she's going back on birth control, and um, it's good for her because the doctor said that she shouldn't have any more children. And I was like, that doctor's not God. That doctor doesn't know what she should do. That doctor can't give the final say on, whether or not she should bring more people into this world. Like, who do these doctors think that they are? And, and they just say these things to these people, but, it must have been a very traumatic experience for her. The life of her child was in danger. And so I understand her, wanting to err on the side of caution. But I told her mom, I was like, she could be like, a Leah, or not Leah. Was it Leah? I'm mixing up my Bible characters. But basically, I think it was a guy in the Bible, his wife, she was barren and she couldn't conceive children. And she prayed and she asked God. And a side note, every woman in the Bible who was barren, if she was godly, if she prayed and she sought God, God gave her at least one child, 100% of the time, every single one. Every woman in the Bible who was barren, and there are a few. There's like a handful of them. It's not super uncommon in the Bible. Every last one of them had at least one child. And so if you're a godly woman, then you will have at least one child. And but yeah, I was like, she could be a testimony to women, because God said, to be fruitful and multiply. And so for her to step out on this leap of faith that it would take for her to say, I'm not going on birth control. I am going to continue to, try to have children, or I'm just going to have a regular natural relationship with my husband. And if a child comes, then God bless it. And then if a child doesn't come, then God bless that too. Because there are people who aren't on birth control, aren't practicing any type of contraception, who don't get pregnant. And that's, they might just have one or two children because that's all that God wants to give them, and praise God. But if God sees fit to give you a child, because children come from God, then don't be fearful. He knows what you can do. He knows what your body's like. He knows what you can handle, and he will give you the strength to do what you need to do. And so, yeah, we can be so stricken with fear for many different reasons, whether it be for your personal health or for what's going on outside. But there's no need to be fearful if you're a Christian, because you serve the God that's able. And so, yeah. And so wrapping up, I want to get to what I was saying to Joshua, and how the back end of this, because people want to talk about how, I can't afford kids because kids are expensive, and I don't want to bring a child into the world because the world's crazy, or I don't want to have a kid because I'm not stable in my relationship and I don't have a good partner. The same reasons that are inhibiting you from having a kid, and that are reasons to make you not want to have a kid, are actually the exact same reasons why you should have children, ironically enough. And so, like when it comes to finances, people want to talk about how expensive it is to have kids. Friend, it's expensive to get old. Unless you plan on passing away in your 50s or your 60s, or earlier, it's expensive to get old. Unless you are like extremely healthy and you're very strong and you just, pass away in your sleep one day, praise God, if that were to happen. But, to have Alzheimer's care, to have dementia care, have MS care, have care for, you are just in a retirement home, you're in an assisted living center, you're, anywhere, any type of care that you need as an elderly person, that is extremely expensive. And so if you have a bunch of children, then one, they can help you with those expenses, or two, you can just live with them and they can take care of you. Like, and this is another thing, I'm speaking from experience. My aunt, she fell ill, not last summer, like not summer of 23, but summer of 21. Gosh, it doesn't feel like it was that long ago. But yeah, she fell ill, and my dad, he wanted me to move in with her and take care of her, and I did, and I lived with her for like not even a year. She's in her 80s, but she like bounced back like crazy. Like it's a really miraculous story how she managed to recuperate the way she did. Like she had like pneumonia and something else was wrong with her, and she was bedridden for a while, but now she's like back up, and she's driving and everything, and it was just a really beautiful story of how God redeemed her in her health. But yeah, she doesn't have any children, and so I had to come in to she had to rent one of her brother's kids. Hold on, my battery's dying. Charger. Oh my gosh. And so she had to rent one of her brother's kids to, take care of her. And, thankfully I was there and I didn't mind. But, if I had been a lot older, or if, I had like my own family of like 4 or 5 kids that are young and I'm taking care of them, or if I lived halfway across the country, then what would she have done? She'd have had to pay someone out of pocket. I mean, she has health insurance, but, even those deductibles and copays, those are expensive. And so, she was in a position where fortunately I was there for her and she was able to, use me as assistance. But, you need to have people with you. You need to have young people with you. And so this last article that we're going to go over talks about how, this end of life care, and I don't want to say end of life care because you could need help in your 60s and then you're on care for like 20 years. So not necessarily end of life care, but as you get older, that's expensive. So don't think that, okay, well, I'm gonna save my money by not having kids. Oh, well, you better save a lot of money because you're gonna need it to buy and rent people to come take care of you, which your children could have done. So getting into this article, it says Beth Roper had already sold her husband Doug's boat and his pickup truck. Her daughter sends $500 a month or more, but it was nowhere near enough to pay for the $5,950 a month bill at Doug's assisted living facility. So last year, Roper, 65, abandoned her own plans to retire. To the public school librarian from Pocosin, VA, it feels like a betrayal of a social contract. Doug Roper, a longtime high school history teacher and wrestling coach, has a pension and Social Security. The Ropers own a home, they have savings, yet the expense of Doug's residential Alzheimer's care poses a grave threat to the middle-class nest egg. At nearly $72,000 a year, assisted living for Doug at 67 costs more than her $65,000 annual salary. It's devastating, she said. You can't wrap your head around it. A wave of Americans have been reaching retirement age largely unprepared for the extraordinary costs of specialized care. These aging baby boomers, 73 million strong, the oldest of whom turned 77 this year, pose an unprecedented challenge to the U.S. economy, as the individual family should shoulder an incredibly ruinous financial burden with little help from stalemated policymakers in Washington. So, yeah, you think that, okay, you think that you're going to be able to just kind of get out of it scot-free, but you always gotta pay. There's no such thing as a free lunch out here. And so going on, it says, the dilemma is particularly vexing for those in the economic middle. They can't afford the high cost of care on their own, yet their resources are too high for them to qualify for federal safety net insurance. And I know a woman like this who's in this personal position where she needs in-home care and she makes too much for government assistance, but she makes too little to get all the care that she would like to have. An estimated 18 million middle-income boomers will require care for the moderate to severe needs, but be unable to pay for it. According to an analysis of the gap by the Center for Retirement Research at Boston College, it is really enormous. It's this really enormous financial bomb sitting out there that most people are just hoping won't hit them, said Mark A. Cohen, co-director of the Leading Age LTSS Center at the University of Massachusetts at Boston. There's an incredible amount of confusion and denial. It's no surprise that people put off decisions about how to get by during the final years and decades of life. It's unpleasant to consider, and in the United States, there are few good options. Home care aides are in short supply. Nursing homes are seen as overly institutional and cater to the most disabled. You can scroll down a little bit more. Okay. Assisted living facilities, the fastest growing category of elderly care, provide an independent home-like environment for seniors who need some help with day-to-day functions. Chandeliers, comfy sofas, wood paneling, and plush carpets are standard in common areas. You can get paneling. Oh, you can get your own apartment with your own bathroom, but it starts at $60,000 a year on average, according to the National Investment Center for Senior Housing and Care. And costs go up as residents age and need more care. Locked units for dementia patients, which increasingly are being established within assisted living facilities or as standalone facilities, run more than $80,000 a year on average. And one of these is not far from me, a center where it's a locked in facility for dementia or memory loss clients. I guess they kind of put them all together as in in those centers like that. Um, Hold on just a second. All right. So my charger, I had to get my charger. My computer was about to die. But okay, so yeah, decades of neglect in nursing homes for a Biden plan for staff mandates. Long-term care costs present the single largest financial risk facing seniors and their families. The National Council of Aging and UMass Boston researchers said in a 2020 report. It has to be addressed because ultimately it will be a societal crisis. These are the school teachers and the firefighters and the working people who take care of all of us who cannot afford the senior housing that is being built out there right now. And Beth McKay, chief economist for NIC. So yeah, so like I was saying that you know it's expensive to get old, and if you have a family of like 5 or 6 kids, then you're going to be able to lean on them and have them either you can move in with them and they can take care of you depending on how severe your needs are, or if you're really deteriorating mentally and you are kind of out of control, then they can help. You have like if you have like 8 kids, then they can all kind of pitch in and help pay for your needs, or what have you. And so there's just a lot more options that you have as an elderly person if you have a really big support system around you. Because of course, like your spouse, they're going to get older too, so they might not be able to help you, and so you need someone who can help you, someone who has a vested interest in helping you, and so that should be your children. That's the natural order of things. Is that you and your spouse, you take care of your children when they're young, and then you and your spouse get taken care of by your children when you guys are old. And so that is just, the natural, beautiful circle of life. And you can scroll down some more, David. And so another thing I wanted to mention about, how it's the reverse card for when you get to the end of life is that, you think like, oh, I don't want to have kids because I don't want to bring kids into the society. That's crazy. When in reality, bringing kids into the society that's crazy is the only answer. It's only way. That is the best thing that you can do, because who's going to rescue the society except new people being brought into it generation after generation? Like like I was saying, I was talking to some people on Instagram, talking to some feminists, and I was saying I saw this video where this like 6-year-old girl was like cleaning up the house and she was like making her dad coffee and all this stuff. And people were like, "Oh, this is terrible. You're teaching her how to be a slave." And I was like, "This is great. You're teaching her domestic skills. She's going to be somebody's wife someday. She's going to be a great wife. Keep up the good work." And this feminist, she was like, "Oh, I hope you're infertile, and I hope that you never get to, bring any people into the world and make them think like you." And I said, "Girl, if I'm infertile, I'm gonna adopt 10 kids and I'm gonna still make them think like me. And people like me are the ones who are breeding, and we're gonna outbreed the parasites like you." And so, and that's what we gotta do. So you can't hide behind society and say that, "Oh, I don't want to have any kids because the world is too crazy." Who's gonna fix it? Like Bob Marley said, the people who are making this world worse are not taking a day off. How can I? The people who are making this world worse are attacking the children or are targeting the children. And so we need to target the children. We can't save everybody who's already here, but we can bring some new people in, doggone it, and make them like us and have them think like us. And so, yes, and a Bible verse to go with that is Proverbs 22:6. It says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." Another one that goes with that hand in hand is Deuteronomy 11:18 and 19. That says, Therefore shall ye lay up these my words in your heart and in your soul, and bind them for a sign upon your hand, that they may be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall teach them your children, speaking of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. So what that's saying is that we as Christians, we should have God's word and we should have the law of God all around us all the time. And not only that, but we need to be teaching them to our children. As a parent, it is your job to teach your children. It is not the job of the government or the school, instead that they are a teacher, to teach your child. It's your job, because your children are supposed to be like you. And if you're not raising them, if you're not teaching them, then how are they going to ever be like you? And so, yes, the answer to the problem of the culture is that you need to change the culture. You need to put some new people into the culture. You need to add some new genes to the gene pool. And so that is the answer. I'm going back to this article about how sad it is that how so many people are aging out of care. It says that nursing homes provide the most intensive care for the most dependent seniors and function like medical facilities, averaging $120,000 a year unless you qualify for Medicaid. The federal insurance program for the poor and elderly, Medicaid, will kick in only once an elderly person's resources are drained away. Nursing homes are viewed as a destination of last resort. More than 70% of older Americans say that they are unwilling to live in one, according to a 2021 poll by John A. Hartford Foundation, which advocates and funds research about age-related issues. Families often rush to shop among these care options when a health or safety crisis strikes. They take out loans, liquidate real estate, and ask family members to chip in for costs. They turn to public internet funding sites like GoFundMe for help. For many families, the cost of long-term care are horrifying. But because of the daunting expenses, many simply allow elderly people with dementia and other infirmities to remain in precarious conditions at home, possibly alone or cared for by an aging spouse, extended family, and neighbors or volunteers. Adult children sometimes up in their own lives to care for an aging relative. And so, yeah, you know, based on how this is, written, I don't know how your parents, they upended their lives for you. When they brought you into the world, they wanted you to experience the world and to, live a beautiful, fruitful life. And so when they need you, because that's what, your parents are going to need you at some point, to help them, whether they can't wipe their own booty, or whether they need to walk, or whether they need to whether you need to take them to the store, take them to the doctor, they can't drive anymore, what have you. It's an homage and it's an honor and a privilege to be able to take care of your parents in their declining years when they have done the same thing for you. People act like, oh, it's not my responsibility to do that. I don't need to do that. I don't need to, upend my life for that. And it's like, how selfish and wicked can you be to have that kind of attitude to your own parents, for Pete's sake? There are people who are in cruise ships and yachts, and there are people who can barely afford to live, her last name, who toured several assisted living facilities for her mother near their homes in Enfield, Connecticut. And you can scroll down, David. The buildings she saw were inviting and seemed safe, she said, but they were unaffordable at over $4,000 a month for base rent and much more for people with dementia. So her mother continued to live alone in her own home, getting by with daily drop-in visits from family. And here it gives average monthly cost for long-term care in 2019. Home care aid, 40 hours a week is about $46,000. Assisted living is $49,000. Dementia care, $67,000. And a nursing home is the highest at the $10K range. It seems like a failure of industry because you've got money on the table and you have people who could afford monthly rents, and the industry is not meeting that need, said Caroline Pearson, the lead author of the landmark 2009 demographic study called The Forgotten Middle in Old Age. It is disturbing that the only option is to completely spend down and impoverish yourself, said Pearson, who is now executive director of the Pearson Center on Healthcare. Assisted living is too often fails older, sicker residents, report says. Growth in assisted living facilities has been fueled by real estate investment trusts, which are focused on generating stable, recession-resistant returns from their properties, experts say. That means attracting wealthy clients with greater luxury and amenities. In 2020, according to federal estimates, there are 818,000 people living in assisted living and residential units for dementia patients, compared with 1.2 million in nursing homes. The number of assisted living facilities grew 24% from 2015 through 2022 in 99 U.S. metro areas analyzed by the NIC, while the number of nursing homes declined by 2.8%. The assisted living industry, major Washington trade group, the National Center for Assisted Living, said in an emailed statement that it recognizes affordability is a problem. It said government must have a role in creating better options. Now, this is the thing that is just, people, they can identify problems, but they can never actually get to the root of the problem. They can never actually do anything that's going to solve the problem because they're not really thinking about the whole thing. These people, they can see that, okay, we have a problem. We have too many elderly people who cannot afford their end of life care, who cannot afford, the assisted living, what have you. We have too many people who cannot afford that, and so, what are we gonna do? And then here comes Big Daddy Government. He says, "Hi, we're here from the government. We're here to hear." And it's like, they see that, oh yeah, people are having to, take out, liquidate their assets and take out second mortgages to be able to afford care. So what's the answer? Oh, we're going to just, fund more money to the government. And why don't we just do things the way we used to do them? Because this is a new problem. And this is not even an international problem. No, only certain areas have this problem where people are, where societies are becoming top heavy. Like, I think it's China, or maybe it's Japan. I can't remember which one. But one of them is having an issue where their society is becoming very top heavy. They have a lot of elderly people and not enough young people to take care of them. And so, with supply and demand, the cost of, taking care of these older people is skyrocketing, and they don't know what they're going to do. And it's like, if you just, it could all be so simple, like Lauren has said. If we just do things the way that God told us to do, which is to be fruitful and multiply and have a quiver full of children, and they can help you. And so, wrapping up here, it says, the assisted living industry's major Washington trade group, the National Center for Assisted Living, said in an email statement that it recognizes disability is a problem. Oh yeah, but it must take the government. About 17% of people living in assisted living facilities in 2020 were supported by Medicaid insurance, compared to about 75% in nursing homes, according to federal data. A persistent concern of the industry is that Medicaid reimbursement does not fully cover the cost of care. Even before the pandemic, the long-term care system in the country was broken. It's too expensive for most people, yet it needs further investment to ensure frontline caregivers receive compensation wages and facilities continue to modernize. said LaShawn Betha, NCAL's executive director. You're combining housing and healthcare, and most Americans haven't thought about or care or can't afford to plan for this expense, she said. Advocates for the elderly say a solution would be to build insurance programs that will pay for long-term care and and spread the financial burden over everyone. Of course, spread the financial burden over to everyone instead of making it a problem that is to be dealt with the people who are actually affects and who are directly involved in it. Genius. Germany, Japan, and South Korea have government-sponsored long program as part of the Affordable Care Act in 2010. But after 19 months of study, the Obama administration dropped it, calling it unworkable. Washington State this year is launching a long-term care insurance program financed by a mandatory employee payroll tax of 0.58%. That will provide families money for long-term care, like long-term. Proponents are working on building support for similar programs in California and Michigan. Absent of any comprehensive insurance, interviews show family members are left with the burdens of high costs. And so that's where I'm going to end off on that article. And so, yeah, you know, and so my last point I guess I want to say is about, your partner and how, you're so worried about, picking the right partner at the beginning of, your child's life, that you don't want to pick the wrong one. Um, so that way, okay, I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to go to the sperm bank or something and, have a kid, and I'll be able to raise him better by myself than I would if I had some knucklehead guy holding me down. But the other thing about that is like what I was saying about when it comes to getting older, because you're gonna have two of you getting older, so you need someone to help you. But even if you don't have, the two of you getting old is very lonely. There are so many older people who are in nursing homes who are so sad that they wasted their life chasing money or chasing traveling or chasing whatever, chasing, just sexual escapades, and that they didn't have a actual life partner. They didn't have someone who could stand by them and hold their hand through the end of their life. And what a tragedy that, people would not put the main thing and not be so focused on, actually taking their life seriously and thinking about, you're not going to be young and hot forever, and not thinking about how, when you get older and, what are you going to do then, and who's going to be with you then, and instead just say, well, I'm just going to have a kid by myself, and I'm not going to worry about that, or I don't need a man to help me raise my kids because I can do it myself, or yada yada yada. And it's like, man, you are just not, you're not thinking about the bigger picture. And so, y'all, to baby or not to baby, that is the question. And I think that I've, presented a good enough argument to say that yes, you should baby, and you should baby a lot. So yes, the answer to the problem is to have more children. And if their wife stays at home and they're having lots of children, they'll be picked up more often for promotions, and they usually work harder because they know they have a family to provide for, and they know they need to earn that money for their families. And so, where there's a will, there's a way. And if you just trust God that He is going to provide and that He is going to be there, that I was once young and now I'm old, and I have never seen the righteous forsaken nor his seed begging bread. If you believe that, then God is going to be able to be there for you. And so, step out of faith, stop using your birth control, take off the condom, and have some more children with your spouse. In Jesus' name. I'm Miss Jenny. This has been Candid Conversations with a Housewife. Thank you to Black Man Unfiltered for allowing me up on his platform, on his network. I have really been enjoying these. I am so glad that I get to come up here and do these, talking to you guys, and kind of venturing away from the kind of things that I talk about on my channel. The stuff I do on my channel is more of just like different theological topics or different ideas wrapped around Christianity. But this is more just about like home life and marriage. Of course, no, from the slant of Christianity, because I can't speak from any other position, because that's who I am and what I believe. But I like coming up here and doing these. And so I thank everyone for joining and commenting. For Joshua, for EAE, Corey, for here for the tea, all of you, thank you so much. And for the guys that came up and talked on the panel. And so, yes, I hope you guys have a terrific evening. Have a great rest of your weekend. Make sure you make it to church in the morning. Right back here, same time next week.